Hi, my name is Elisa Minkin. I'm a general pediatrician and I'm also co-chair of the JOMA Preventative Health Committee. And I'm really fortunate and really excited and really honored to be here today with Rabbi Yossi Bensoussan. Rabbi Bensoussan serves as a Mashgiach Ruchani at the Yeshiva High School of Cleveland. He's a certified alcohol and substance abuse counselor who currently has a private practice and does motivational speaking and community education on addiction all over the US and Israel. Rabbi Bensoussan is well known also for his regular column, Risk Factor, in Mishpacha magazine. So I'm really excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for having me. I really appreciate it. It's a real honor.
Oh, no, it's my honor.
Like this.
It really is. And as I've told you, my daughter and I are super, super big fans of your Risk Factor column.
Wow.
So I want to start out by saying I really want this to be proactive. I don't want it to be frightening and depressing, especially in today's difficult times. I feel like we're all so emotionally drained and exhausted. And I remember how it felt. I remember how it felt to be a teenager, hearing about these things. I remember I'm an older parent, but when my kids were a bit younger and we had programs in our kids' schools, I found it, kind of overwhelming and scary and not necessarily empowering. So I really want this talk to, be proactive and empowering and not leave people feeling like, well, wow, this is scary.
Well, yeah, it's really interesting, to be honest with you. When people first meet me, I tell a lot it's not that I tell a lot of jokes, it's that I laugh a lot. I should say that. A lot of those jokes aren't being told. They're just going on in my head. And so I laugh a lot, and I think, in general, a more jolly type of a person, until things get a little serious. But, people a little bit get shocked by what I do. Not anymore, really, that they know me, but, people get a little bit surprised by what I do because, here I am, jumping around and laughing. And then, what I do most of my day is very heavy and very, very, very serious. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with people's perception of what's going on out there. It also feeds into the negative stigma of what's happening out there. And, these are things that we could talk about, openly, that we can discuss. And yeah, we can even make jokes about it. Yeah, we can. It's possible. One of the tools that I use, the first thing, especially if I'm dealing with a teenager, one of the tools I use as one of the first things is when he comes in or she comes in, I always start making jokes with them because they're like, oh, okay, so you're not just going to be sitting here trying to pull my brain apart or change me, or, we have to be able to be happy and, be positive around these types of things. And I know the type of seminars and speeches that you're referring to. I've been to them too. My real problem with those is that not only are they not uplifting in any way, they're not only fear mongering, in my opinion, and fear inducing. There's no advice given. I mean, there's no structure to it. It's just telling you how bad these things are usually. And yeah, we know how bad it is. We get it. It's really bad. But now, preventative, how do we do that? And no one seems to want to answer those questions. And I don't know why. But, yeah, I definitely try to stay on the side of empowerment of people because I think the last thing that ends up being a problem with that is that people tend to believe in professionals a little too much. So everyone's so afraid to touch this if they're not a professional at addictions, if they're not a professional at teenagers, not a professional therapist, if they're not a professional this, a professional that. And I'm going to tell you, of my years, the people that I've seen be the most effective more often than not, professionals are amazing. I'm not taking away, and to gain the knowledge from them is incredible. But when I see turning points, it's usually the layman that makes a turning point in a person's life. Whether we're talking about a teenage boy getting a job, by some guy who takes him under his wing and teaches him, we're talking about, an older mentor for a girl, any of these types of things can become such a turning point in that person's life. And you don't need to know really that much about addiction or about, any of these things to really be able to do that.
Right. And I also have a problem with this concept of teens at risk, because my thing is all of our kids are at risk. It
Oh
becomes
yeah.
labeling kids who have already shown issues,
Yeah.
and they're left to the professionals.
Yeah. I think it's also an issue because I believe it tells people this assumption that like teens are at risk, but adults are fine.
That's a whole.
Adults are doing okay. I don't know about that. I know plenty of adults that are in a lot worse of a situation. I mean, teenagers, we could just blame, if we really wanted the easy way out, we could just blame on adolescence and being a teenager. You know, when someone's 30 and decides that they're going to start experimenting with drugs and alcohol and, you know, want to go off the derech or whatever, you know, however you want to term that or whatever, you know, that's a little bit more of an issue. They're married, they have 4 kids, and there's a lot more going on here.
Right,
You know, so I think we're a people. I think we are definitely a people at risk. But my issue with the term teens at risk, when people would ask me, you know, what do you do? You know, we heard you work with teens at risk. I say, no, I work with rabbis at risk with teenagers. If you met anyone on my staff, they're all crazy. So no, I think we're more in danger of losing our minds than our kids. But in general, you know, one of my problems with teens at risk is that it's that fear mongering.
Mm-hmm.
And this used to be an idea. And I think it started off sort of innocently, where people were in denial about where they were holding and what they, you know, what kids were being involved in,
Right.
and what Jewish kids were able to get up to, and what teenagers in general were able to get up to. And so through this sort of impactful fear, you know, thing, they were able to raise awareness. I just think we're past that point.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've pushed past that point to the point that more phone calls that I get is me trying to calm a parent down and saying, relax, it's okay, relax. I understand. He had a phone you didn't know about. He doesn't work for the CIA. Let's take in a deep breath here. Everyone relax, right? I'm doing that a lot more often than I'm telling a parent, oh, wow, you should really be freaking out right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is really, really scary stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 10 to 1, I'm doing that more often than I am doing the latter.
Just people are so worried that they're seeing something.
Yeah, and they jump to these conclusions, and then they lock the kid at home, and then they, you know, like, I think every single teenager, every healthy teenager is gonna have a shift of some kind. You know, if he starts paying more attention to his hair, or if it's a girl, if she starts wanting to wear, clothing that isn't exactly the fullest of acceptable, and so that's being a teenager. I mean, that's part of it. If you allow it, and when I say allow it, I don't mean the behaviors, but I mean you allow the person room to breathe, you're not going to be facing it for too long. If you try to squelch it, if you try to lock this kid in a closet and squelch the behavior, they're going to dig their heels in, and you're going to be looking at a 25-year-old who's still doing the same, acting out because they never got a chance to.
Right. So do you think that we can prevent teen substance abuse? And if so, what are some good ways? Because again, we're going to stay more preventative rather than try to scare people. Like, we're not going to talk, statistics, and if there are good statistics.
Thank you. I'm going to tell you, honestly, there's going to be, there are a lot of people that are going to disagree with me on this. I like saying that before I say certain things, because I want you to know I could be wrong here. There's the possibility I'm wrong here, but I don't think I am. There's not much you can learn from the post-addiction stage. Mm-hmm. Everyone suffers so differently in that point, and they recover so differently. Yeah, the general framework tends to be the same, but there's so much information that you would need in order to really, really, and it varies so much from personality to person to community to city, believe it or not. Like literally, if you live in one city or another city, your chances of, it's like there's so many different factors to take into account when it comes to the post-addiction. The pre-addiction, that's all basically the same, and the measures are so much higher. I mean, what percentage of drug addicts or teens at risk, or which that was a complete fluke that I coupled those two in the same sentence, not the same thing at all. Right. Or any of these things are just, a kid who has this solid relationship with their parents and solid family ties and solid school, solid this and solid that, and then just wakes up one day and he says, hey, what's marijuana? And then goes running out the front door. I've never seen that happen. And that's obviously an exaggeration. You know, there's usually a mix of some stuff. But at the end of the day, the preventative is really the root that people, and it is not focused on. It is not focused on. I would say half, but that is a gross exaggeration. It is not focused on. It is barely focused on at all. I mean, how many parents really go for parenting classes if their kids are okay? If your oldest is an 8-year-old and you feel he's okay and everyone's okay and there's just ups and downs in the house, you're not going to a parenting class. You should be, but you're not. The reason being is that you feel it's okay. That's not okay. You should be loving your family, being home, being with them, up your game. If it's okay, make it great. There's no reason not to. You have to re-up what it is that you know in parenting. Yeah. So now, as far as
before I forget, I wish that we had the mandatory parenting skills instead of, or not instead of, but at least in addition to all of these courses.
Oh yeah, I've been trying to yell that for a long time, but nowadays when anyone comes to me to ask me anything, I say, okay, so which parenting classes have you taken? They're like, oh, well, we got a drasha one. I'm like, no, which course? Like a course have you taken? And they're like, well, we haven't. And usually, most of the times we haven't. So I say, okay, so we got to take one, and I'll work with you as you're taking it. And they're like, no, well, my kid's 14. I'm like, I don't care. I know he's not. He's a 14-year-old who didn't get whatever the 6-year-old version of him needed. You're going to have to give that to him now.
I think that was becoming big now. And I did a whole talk with Hannah Parrell Handler from your community on her amazing program, Atidena. I just want to give a shout out for that and catch them before they fall, I think is the name of the podcast I did with Hannah Parrell. People should listen to it. I'm seeing more and more schools. I don't know if they're doing as comprehensive a program as hers, which is amazing. But there is this concept of social emotional learning. It's not even just about parenting. It's also about the kids learning something that the parents may not know how to give them, but we can still, find ways to teach it to them. And it's really valuable.
Without a question. I mean, once you're going to mention like something like Atidenu or something like that, I mean, I highly doubt most schools are doing it as comprehensively as Atidenu. I mean, those people are dedicated. That is, but that is going to be one of the things. I actually like to go a different direction when it comes to these things. Okay, so being a parent, and I think this is the criteria. I mean, this is step one. You got to look at yourself first. I've seen parents come in and just choose something randomly. Like, okay, so the kid doesn't want to play piano or doesn't want to play football. And they're like, no, he has to play football or socially he will not. And I'm always looking at the father and, they always fall into one of two categories. Either he's a football player or he's very much not a football player. He's never usually in the middle. So I'm always going to ask him, like, what's so important over here? And the father will say one of two things, depending who he is, well, that's how I was able to make friends, or that's why I didn't have any friends. So now this is baggage that this person is still holding on to and is now getting into fights with his kid about. We need to really be in presence of who we are also. Anytime anyone ever wants to, and I might get killed for this one, but anytime anyone wants to send a kid to therapy, I always say, who has a parent spoken to and what have they tried already beforehand? Meaning there's so much parents can do. There's so much. So one of the first things I always say is, what are you working on for you? Where are you working? That's number one. The second most important, or not the second most important, this isn't in any specific order in reality, but I think these are the criteria. This is the prerequisites to doing this. It gets me in trouble a lot when I ask them this, and specifically the fathers start yelling at me. But I'm sorry, it's super important. Where's your marriage holding? A kid is as strong, and well, it's not a kid is as strong, but a kid's abilities to be strong. A kid's abilities to weather the storm, a kid's abilities to say no to peer pressure goes by who's leading him. And you, as an individual or not, you as a couple are. When he looks up to the both of you and you're equal to him, I don't care who you think he gets along with better. One of you might just be more approachable than the other. That doesn't matter. He looks up to both of you. When he sees conflict on top, he loses his foundation.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know what's real anymore. So when he gets peer pressure, when he gets pulled into other things, yeah, he's going, because they don't have it figured out.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know. So I got to find someone who does. This friend of mine seems to be really cool, really accepted, really happy. What's he doing? You're leaving it open. You're leaving structure open. You need to be solid together. You need to be solid together. And, you know, I could get into a lot of trouble for this one. Also, why not? Once we're getting in trouble, we could call this episode "Get in Trouble with Yossi Bensoussan." It's fine. But, you know, when you're dealing, someone said to me the other day that he wanted to, you know, start in my community here, you know, help for siblings of, you know, disabled kids. You know, so much of the attention and everything fall to the child with the disabilities. And as I'm sure, you've heard, you know, the other children tend to be lacking, you know, in attention. So they, you know, to create an older brother or older sister system. And we were talking about it. And I said to him, okay, so what are you doing for the parents? So he's like, no, it's just gonna be for the siblings. I'm like, no, then it's not gonna work. He's like, what are you talking about? I was like, what are you doing for these kids' parents? He's like, well, the parents are adults. They can. I'm like, no, they can't.
No.
Or run down. You have any idea what it is to have a child like that? You have any clue what that takes? I mean, you just take your life, right? And one time I heard a comedian say, he's like, you want to know what it is to have 5 children? He's like, imagine you're drowning and someone hands you a baby. It's exactly that. Like, take your life as it is now, right? You have stress, you have anxiety, you have all these things. Now add a whole nother life of that on you. Like, just in a whole nother one of those. You're getting out of bed in the morning. The only reason you're getting out of bed in the morning is because if you don't, people around you are literally going to die. So you have to. Your life becomes a whirlwind of doctors, prescriptions, therapies, this, that, the right products, it becomes so crazy.
Right, it's overwhelming.
I'm like, you want to help these siblings? Help their parents. Have someone come in X amount of times, X amount of often to be able to take over and send them to Costco. I don't know. Send them anywhere just by themselves so they can remember what each other looks like, so that they can remember that they're important for each other. It's so important. It goes no different when we're talking about raising any child. When they look up and they see that distance. My wife went to a parenting class by Rabbi Spetner in Eretz Yisrael, which is fantastic, a fantastic parenting class. And one of the things I loved about it so much is how much emphasis it put on you working on yourself, you know, in order to work on your kids. But more than that, she said when she started, she was like, everything I'm about to tell you is what I believe is the right way in chinuch. And I'm only wrong if your husband disagrees with me.
That's a point.
So, right. So everyone's like, yeah, okay. She's like, no, I'm not joking. It is so much more important for you and your husband to be a unified front than for you to do any of the things I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you are a unified front. So those are the first 2 things. As an individual, make sure you are ready to want to parent. One of my Rabbeim in Eretz Yisrael had a glass, a mirrored plaque on his front door with their name on it. And he would always stop and look at it. And someone finally asked him, like, why does Rabbi stop and stare at the name on the door before? Like, it's your house. You know it's your house. He's like, I'm not looking at the name on the door. He's like, the reason I got the mirrored one is that I could look at myself before I go in.
Oh, wow.
So he said, Rabbi, I didn't know you to be such a vain person. He's like, it's nothing to do with vanity. He's like, I need to know how I look before I go in. Am I smiling? Am I ready for this? Am I ready to go in there and do my job? Am I ready to go in there and now, I know people to do this before they get on stage. I know people to do this before they perform. They look at themselves in a mirror and they say, are you ready? Are you ready? I used to do it. Are you ready for this? But before you go into your house, why? They're there to serve you, aren't they? There to get you your dinner and you your, what do you call it? This is the place where you, he said, no. He said, this is the place where you go all out. This is the place where it matters the most. So you have to know that you're ready for you. You're working on you. Your children are, being married is possibly one of the greatest opportunities being married is the greatest opportunity, in my opinion, for a person to work on themselves. There will never, ever be another opportunity in your entire life like being married to work on yourself. Now, having children, is that times a couple. So you have working on yourself in your marriage, and you have working on yourself with your children that have all these preconceived notions. I'm not going to get into that now, but at the end of the day, you got to work on yourself, and then you got to work on your marriage to make sure that you guys are solid. You guys are solid. You got to forgive yourself your trespasses. You got to forgive each other your trespasses. You got to forgive each other your differences and be solid together.
Absolutely.
After that, then we can get into what we do with our kids. So one of the first things I always tell parents when they call me, outside of, the prerequisites that I just said, is that, okay, so once we're dealing with the kid, the vast majority of parents that I've seen, so I can't, I don't know everyone, but the vast majority of parents that I've seen, and this is working with regular kids in schools, kids that are not, for lack of a better term, at risk or aren't, suffering in any way, just regular kid. The vast majority of parents I've seen do not know their children. They don't know who they are. They have no idea. Now, doesn't mean they don't live together.
Right.
They live together. They spend time together. They have fun together. And they will get him the perfect gift on Hanukkah and his birthday. The perfect gift. That they know.
Mm-hmm.
But who this kid is, you don't know. You know who you're making him into, but you don't know who he is. Because who he or she is an individual. They have their own ideas. They have their own problems. They have their own thoughts. They have their own wants. They have their own everything. And most parents don't know who their kids are. And the reason is because, well, they've never went on a date with them. I mean, how do you get to know a person? The way you get to know a person is that you go on a date with them. That's why we do that, is to see who this person is. So most parents, not most, a good portion of parents are going to be are viewing it as more of a business a model. So they're going to sit with their kid. The kid comes home from school. If they do sit down for dinner together, which I think, every family needs to do, a couple times a week. I understand it's not possible to do every night for most people, but you got to do it as often as you possibly can, to sit down for dinner together. They sit down for dinner and they'll be like, okay, so how was school? Immediately. Like, how was school? So it's not a bad question. It's a great question to start with. It's fine. How was school? As long as you're always asking that, it's fine. How was school? School is good. You're not going to get much from it. But what I mean by the how was school question is when you turn to the one kid who is struggling and whose teacher called the other day and who you had to talk with, and you turn to him and you look at him and you say, how was school? You're just trying to get information over there. The best way to explain this is like, if your mother-in-law called you and said, I'm sure you get along great with your mother-in-law. I'm just saying in general, if your mother-in-law calls you and says, hi, honey, I think we should get together for coffee this week. You're like, oh, no. Oh, God, no. Like, what does she want? This isn't going to be like a laissez-faire, like a nice little sit down and a chit chat. She wants something. She's trying to find out something. She heard something. Something like that. Most kids don't trust their parents because their parents continuously are badgering them for like information on their life because they just want to make sure they're safe, right? And this goes back to what we were talking about before about the fear of parenting. You got to stop being so afraid. Get to know the kid. So how do you get to know a kid? You don't have conversation like that. If shidduch dating, if a boy and girl went out on a first date and 18 minutes into the first date, the boy turns to her and says, okay, I'm good. Let's do this. Let's get married. She'd be like, I'm sorry. He's like, that's it. I'm good. Let's get married. You've checked all the boxes on my list. I'm ready. And she'll run out of there. She won't even wait for a ride home. She'll run out of there. She'll run home. She'll be like, the guy was nuts. He proposed on the first date. I don't even know him. I don't even know the guy's last name, right? He went too far, right? And no one's going to side with this guy over here. He went too far. What do we do on a first date? Well, on a first date, we just have chit chat. We just try to enjoy each other's company. There's nothing heavy, nothing too important. We don't discuss anything like, so how many kids do you want to have? No, back up, how many siblings do you have? Let's start there, get to know the person. I tell every single parent that I speak to, the first thing, I'm like, when was the last time you went on a date, on a first date with your kid? Individually. You got to date your children in order to get to know them. We wouldn't marry somebody without knowing them first. You can't date your kid. You can't really get involved in your kid's life if you don't know them. Just because they live downstairs doesn't mean anything.
Right. I could play devil's advocate here, though, and say there are people who do shidduch dating like a checklist. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want that relationship with your child where you're like, do you meet what I want you to meet? Are you doing what I want you to do? Are you meeting my expectations? Right.
Right. So that's why that's why shidduchim is able to happen like that, because you're not interviewing a person or getting together to know a person so that you can raise them. You're getting to know them so that you can build something together. That's where the example, I guess, would end. But with this child, you're getting to know them because if you don't get to know them, they're gone. Like, there is no other option here. So I hate to put the pressure on with it, but it's super, super important. You're not doing this because you have another option. You're doing this because this is the only way to get through to the kid.
But I think you have to do this with the idea that you really want to know who they are, not...
Yeah, 100%. 100%. But the only way to really get to know is to have someone open up to you, which is really our goal here with our children. At the end of the day, the equation is pretty simple. I mean, it's I'm oversimplifying it, but it's still pretty simple. Kids who are communicating openly with their parents are going to do well, barring extreme circumstances. Yeah, there's cases of extreme abuse that could happen outside of the home. Oh, okay, barring extreme circumstances, a child who is communicating openly and feels comfortable communicating openly with his parents is going to do well.
But I think that there's different kinds of kids. I think there's kids who are going to be more open by nature, and those who, you could sit with them till, you're purple and you might not get there.
So when it comes to that, so this is the answer. This is the question I get a lot. I've done it. I went on the dates. I'm getting nowhere. So the first thing I say is, okay, that's a story you made up that you're getting nowhere. I guarantee you, if I pull your kid in over here and he's being honest, he will say that he loves it and you're getting somewhere. I guarantee you're getting somewhere. Number one. Number two, and probably, more importantly, this is where like the idea of love languages come in. What are you doing with the kid, and how are you forcing him to express in the way that you express? Are you forcing him to sit down? Moms love sitting down with their sons and talking. The average teenage boy can't stand listening to the average teenage boy's conversation with his friends. You've never heard human beings grunt and mumble that much and still somehow understand each other. None of it makes sense. I work with teenagers all day. Anytime I walk into a classroom and the guys are sitting there having a conversation with each other, and I know teens pretty well. They're having a conversation. I have to focus really hard in order to really be part of the conversation. I'm like, wait, what? He did what? I don't even understand what's happening here. They're not very expressive people in that way, but they feel love in other ways. When you ask a kid, for instance, let's say you take a kid out to eat, right? Teenage boy, you take him out to eat, right? He orders whatever it is. You give him, like, this is just a trick. This is not to actually be used. I just feel like I have to say that. You give him a piece. You ask him for a piece of what he ordered. He tastes it, and then you say, "Try what I had. Tell me which one you like better. I'm curious." And he'll taste yours, and he'll give you his opinion of whatever it is, and then you just continue conversation. I guarantee you, in that thing where you asked him his opinion, just in something so small, it meant the world to him. You treated him as a person. Right. Who do you do that with? Who would you do that with, sharing a plate like that? Sharing a dinner for no reason. For no reason. You're not trying to get him to do better in school. You're not trying to get him you're not trying to do anything. Who would you sit there doing that with? A person that you like and respect. A person you like to be around. When this kid feels that you like to be around them, that being around him is not this ultra pressurized thing, you don't have to really communicate anymore. He feels it. When a kid feels that type of acceptance, it's very difficult to get him to do wrong.
So what you're saying is acceptance is more important than the kind of conversation. Like I might think I'm going to have a full-blown conversation with my kid about all kinds of important issues, but really just spending time without any pressure.
Without a question,
right?
In my opinion, without a question. Now, conversations are important, but be ready for them to be one-sided.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is that, let's say, you have to talk to your children about, let's say you want to talk to them about, there's a kidnapper driving around in your neighborhood, and there's been alerts and all these things, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to talk to your kids about it, right? You tell them, don't get in the car. You give them the whole rundown. Now, and then you'll say something along the lines of, if you have any questions, you can ask mommy, you can ask daddy. They'll never have a question.
Never.
Usually. And everyone moves about. That's what that conversation is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
What we want is, Khalila, if anything does ever happen to a child, if anything does make them uncomfortable, if anything does, they'll come and tell us. Mm-hmm. That does not happen through a conversation. The way we build that up happens through a relationship. Mm-hmm. That he feels connected and comfortable with us, that he's going to come and communicate with us when he needs. That takes time, and that takes time of, it sounds counterproductive, but it takes time of doing stuff with them, of being around with them, respectfully with them, no phone, no anything like that, just hanging out with them on what they want to do. So they want to go to bowling, right? You go bowling and you have fun, and you go home. And it's like, why did we just go bowling and have fun and do nothing? I don't understand. Isn't there something you want to talk to me about? But do you see what that question is? What that feeling is, like I said, about the mother-in-law? Mm-hmm. See what that feeling is? This is all conditional. You wouldn't do this with me if you don't want something. You don't enjoy being around me.
Right. It's kind of like
what is it that you want?
Yeah, it's kind of like saying enough positive statements to counteract the negative ones. I got to spend
exactly.
Without wanting things from you.
Right, exactly. So, but with the kid, the positive statements is gonna fall on deaf ears a lot. The positive actions, they can't. They soak it up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what about kids who are having issues? Because even if you have the best relationship, say you're doing all this, and you're like, I'm doing this all already. You haven't told me anything.
Right. So most of the time, I find that if someone says they're doing this, we'll go through how they're doing it, and so like, yeah, I did that. You that sounds singular to me. You did that once, like, yeah, and didn't change anything. Like, okay, so let's deal with that now. Number one, we're not trying to change our kids. We're trying to get to know them. The fact that the goal there is trying to get them to be different is the problem. You have to accept your children as they are. You can't want them to be any different. You're just bringing yourself into, now again, obviously barring extreme circumstances, but usually extreme circumstances are very relative to where a kid's holding. A kid, a 3-year-old bites someone. Everyone loses their mind. He's a biter. I hear it all the time from people, like, the mother say, he's a biter. I never thought I'd have a biter. Everyone starts sitting shiva on this poor kid because he bit someone, or he did it once, and it's not even like whatever. No one mentioned anything about the fact that both his hands and legs were pinned behind his back, and it was all he had in the fence. We're so willing to jump to these things. We need to get to know who they are. Mm-hmm. Once we get to know that, we can start accept. So there's negative behaviors. I'm not saying there isn't, but at the end of the day, depending on the negative behavior, depending on, a lot of times it's as simple as, positive, positive reinforcement, making them a checklist. I've seen it work dozens of times, especially with my own kids. Mm-hmm. I make my kids a checklist to get something that they want. All of a sudden, they're not tired anymore. They can clean up. They know this. They know that. It all works out. It could be as simple as that. or you can have a kid who's acting out. I don't know any kid that acts out just because they want to act out. So, there's the simple checklist, and people are going to say, people write off simplicity way too quickly. I had before the summer, it was during pretty, the pretty heavy part of COVID and everything. And this one woman called me and she said, my son has lost his mind over COVID. He's being a terrorist, and she's going through all these things. And I don't know, it was Siyata Dishmaya, it really wasn't me. I don't know what made me ask this as the first thing, because as I said, there's a couple other things I ask first. But for some reason, I jumped in with this. She's telling me all these horrible things he's doing. And I said, does your kid's school feed him? Do they provide the lunch, or do you send them lunch? So she was like, what does that have to do with anything? I'm like, I'm just curious, I guess, And she goes, no, they provide the lunch. I was like, has he been eating at home? So she was like, well, I mean, we eat. What do you mean? I said, does he eat lunch at the right time that he would have ate it in school?
Mm-hmm.
So she goes, I don't know. I don't know what time to eat lunch in school. So I said, and you sure he's eating 3 meals like he would have been eating if he was in school? And she said, I'm not sure. It doesn't matter. That's not what it is. He's not like hungry or anything. I was like, no, actually, I kind of think he's hungry, to be honest with you. I just don't think he knows to ask, because he's always sent to eat. So why don't you try that out? Sure enough, I don't hear from her, right? She says, okay, I'll try it. Sure enough, I don't hear from her. About 2 weeks ago, I get a call from her, and she says, a completely different situation. My nephew is a teenager, and she's asking me a question. So I said, and she's like, so if you can speak to my sister-in-law, she really wants to talk to you about it. Do you mind meeting my brother-in-law and sister-in-law? My brother and sister. So I said, yeah, sure. No problem. This and that. She's like, I told him how much you helped me. So I was like, I'm just, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here, but I was right about the hunger thing. So she got quiet for a second, and she goes, yeah, he, I started feeding him at a certain time, and he started devouring the food. And all of a sudden he was okay after I stopped acting out. He stopped. It could be something as simple as this kid is hungry.
Mm-hmm.
He just didn't like lunch that day in school, and he acted out. It could be something as simple as that. The only way we know what it is when our kids are going to communicate with us, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, depending on the age of the kid, in a lot of ways, they don't know how to communicate it. So we need to go through the checklist. Is he tired? It's the baby checklist. It's the baby whisperer.
Right.
Is he tired? Is he hungry? And does he need a change of space? He might need a change also, I don't know. But does he need a change of space, right? I live in Cleveland. Right now we happen to be having this gorgeous weather out of nowhere. We don't want to jinx it, but happen to have this gorgeous weather. But in general, it gets very cold here during the winter, and kids are indoors a lot, and it can get very tricky. We made in our house, we made like 2 separate, much against my will. I can't stand playrooms. I don't know why, but playrooms drive me crazy. But we had to make 2 playrooms in our house so that, number one, all the kids could play at the same time, and number two, they can have a change of pace. My wife has a revolving toy situation where certain toys she hides and certain toys she brings out. A lot of times they just need a change of something. They're bored, for lack of a better term.
So I think this is all, really good advice for your typical kid. But I think it's a different planet when it comes to kids who are wired differently. Might be that they have attention problems. It might be that they, are struggling with mental health, sensory issues, anxiety. I put this all out there because I don't think it's extreme or unusual. I'm a pediatrician, and I'm going to tell you, it's like 1 out of 5 kids has this.
Right, 100%. So now, so before what I was discussing was the preventative measures of making sure that things. So those are the preventative measures. Mm-hmm. Now, when we start adding in other factors, is when things get tricky. Mm-hmm. So when we start adding in, let's just throw in, probably, one of the more common I see among my students, one of the most common is either ADD or ADHD or some sort of, we'll go with the learning disabilities over here since they spend most of their time in school. Any of those types of things. It's, first of all, I've been diagnosed with learning disabilities, but this I was not diagnosed with. But there's no question in my mind of everything I know now that I had ADD as a kid. There's no question. I probably still have it as an adult. And, we just went on a hike today with my school. You know why? I couldn't do it. I came into class and I couldn't do it. I couldn't teach. I couldn't do anything. And I was like, guys, I'm sorry. I can't sit down here and do this. It's like the clock isn't moving. I need to do something right now. We're going on a hike. And they're like, oh, we didn't sleep last night. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care what anyone did last night. We're going on a hike. And we drove, 10 minutes away and we went on a hike, much to everyone's dismay. The point is that I definitely have an adult, for sure, ADD. These types of kids, the same idea, the same concept apply. It's just like the kid. It's just bigger. Mm-hmm. It's much bigger. Now, I remember, this is a true story, and I guess this is a little bit of a sad story, but it's not meant to be. They did very well at the end, and everyone lived happily ever after. Okay, so that's no one lives happily ever after. But I'm just saying that they did well. Mm-hmm. But I remember a few years ago, this couple came in to talk about their kid, and I saw right away. I mean, they were just run down. It was like I even asked. I remember they sat down and I asked them, can I get you anything? Can I get you a coffee or a tea or a cup of water? And everyone's like, no, it's okay, it's okay. I was like, all right, do you guys want to drink? Do you want like a whiskey or something? Because you look like you haven't been out together in years, and it looks like you've just been run down. Like maybe just do a date over here, and I'll leave, and you guys can hang out together. And so they just had that look about them, and the mother in like this. Their son is ADHD and very hyperactive, and he doesn't leave his siblings alone, and he's like she said it's like having a crazy person live in our house. It's crazy how affected everyone is by it, and so on and so forth. And it was you could tell it really was weighing on them. And I remember her being so run down and so exhausted. That's the best way to put it. Just emotionally drained. In one of the meetings that she turned to me and she just started crying and she said, why can't he just have leukemia? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm not sure what that means. This is years ago. Nowadays, I've actually heard it a few times, quite a few times. I've heard parents say this. And I've even said it a few times to get parents to say it because I saw they wanted to say it. And she said, why can't he just have leukemia? And I was like, I'm sorry, leukemia? And she was like, yeah, because if he had leukemia, at least I know what it is. I know what's happening. I understand. Oh, she was what I probably shouldn't say, whatever. But she was like, I would understand. I get it. He's sick. She's like, but he's not sick. He's just, he's fine as long as he gets everything he wants immediately when he wants it, and no one bothers him, and no one talks to him, and he gets to play on his computer, and she went through this whole list. And I was like, is that not sick? Because that kind of sounds sick to me. So he's not enjoying himself, right? This isn't fun. Mm-hmm. When he's bouncing off the walls, that's not fun. Even when he's playing his computer, that's not fun. When he's bothering his sisters, that's not fun. He's not having fun. He's acting out. That hurts him too, but he has no idea what else to do. So I said, we have to, up the game. So they created a whole thing around it. They started working with a therapist. They created a whole thing around it where they basically transformed a good room in their house. I mean, not everyone's able to do this, but they transform a whole room in their house to be this padded room where he gets to go in and just lose it in there and really help them in a lot of ways but once he was designing it with them and they were talking to him like, you know, that this is a conversation that happened in front of me. She goes, well, you know what we should do? We should really get you like a high up thing that you can jump off. Cause you know, that spin that you like to do off of the kitchen counter when you knock everything down, like you should really be able to do that in there also. So we should have like a high up thing that you get to jump off of. And he was like, yeah, that would, yeah, that. And I'm looking at what's happening and I'm like, wow, she's really understanding him right now. Like he feels understood. Like she's not saying, why are you jumping off of the counter? Why are you being crazy? She really says, no, I understand that you need to do this. So we're going to create around that idea. Now, obviously, you know, medication either works or it doesn't, or you get the right dose, or you don't get the right dose. Medication is important. All these things are important. I'm not trying to negate, I'm not trying to say it's as simple as giving him a room that he could bounce around in. But you need to be able to stop trying to stop the behaviors and start embracing them in order for him to be able to get past them.
Right, you have to accept where your child is.
Right.
I want to make the point that, you know, you can be, we've been focusing on the parents and the home, but kids have to function in a number of spheres, right? So,
Right.
you know, they're not functioning in school if they can't pay attention. It doesn't matter how many, you know, rooms you have at home.
100%. And that is going to be a very big issue with this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, you know, I don't want parents to leave with this and listen, I listen to this and I do all these things, you know, and it still happened in my family or my friend's family, because there are so many really, you know, what can be thought of as risk factors. I hate to use that term because I don't want people to think that only these kids that fall into that category.
Right.
But it just came up the other day with a parent who said, well, I don't want to give my kid medication because I'm worried they're going to be substance abusers later.
Yeah, so that's not how that works.
No.
At all. That's not how that works. Yeah, but first of all, most people, but a good portion, especially of teenagers who use proper medication, even if it could be abusable medication, they tend not to like it. It's when you use medication for an actual, let's say, you know, a chemical imbalance or something along the lines, it's just balancing you out. You're not getting high. So it's very rare to find that that's going to lead to that. What they're more afraid of, or what they're coupling together here, are the stories of people who, like Khalil, have been in an accident. You know, adults who have been in an accident, start on pain medication, and then continue. So that they're getting closer to the truth, but those two don't equate. That's those two don't go together at all.
No, but I have to say, as a pediatrician, this is a very common thing. Parents who resist medication for whether their children have anxiety, depression, ADHD, they resist the medication, and one of the main reasons is they think of it as a drug their child will be addicted to. And I think studies have shown the opposite, that children who have these problems, who aren't treated, by definition, if they have a significant issue, they're not functioning as well as they could be.
Oh yeah, science has proven that. I mean, it's right. First of all, it's not true. It's not true to begin with. Second of all, even if it was true, which again, I just want to reiterate that it's not. That's not how addiction works. That's not how people start using drugs. That's just not the risk you're taking in not allowing this kid to function with his peers is so much more detrimental and so much higher of a risk of him becoming an addict later of some kind than it is of giving him pills right now or giving him medication right now. Now, I'm not this massive advocate of medicating. You know, yeah, okay, so try something else or do something. But if you're going to come to the point where people tell you that the professionals say that he definitely needs to be medicated, and you don't want to medicate, I'm okay with that also. But you have to pull him out of school. It is not okay to send him to school and have him go through that type of shame, failure, inadequacy. Like, just, it's not okay. That's a form of abuse. You're forcing him to, you know, and the other thing I hear from parents all the time, why can't he just be normal?
Right.
Because normal stinks. That's why. Because if he were normal, you probably wouldn't be paying this much attention to him. because these types of kids make the most awesome adults.
Like you, right?
They just need to get through school. I did horrible in school. Horrible. Like, they used to pass me in school just because they didn't want me saying back. I did really, really, really bad in school. It's okay. Schooling wasn't for me. It just wasn't. The social aspect I was okay in, it was difficult, but I was okay in it. But I did really, really bad in school. So I don't think that, forcing this kid to go to school, if you're not going to give him, and it's not even giving him the advantage he needs. It's leveling the playing field so that he can play. It's just not fair.
Right. I don't think all schools are the same either. I think that, one thing that's important is finding the right school for your child where he can be who he is.
Right. 100%. Also, if we're on the topic of schools, being in contact with teachers, if you know that your son is or daughter, your child is is prone to acting out or finds school difficult or sitting difficult, or you're right, he might not be ADD, he might not be any of these things, he might just be, a just more active kid or whatever it is, and he finds it difficult to sit there, you're going to have a conversation with the teacher. Don't wait for the teacher to call you.
Right.
Let them know that you're on top of it. Schools and parents need to work hand in hand. They tend to work the other way. They tend to work that, schools are happy as long as parents aren't complaining, and parents are happy as long as the teachers aren't complaining.
Right. And the children with behaviors, they'll get called out, but all the quiet kids, anxious or depressed.
Yeah.
Problems.
And no one's paying attention there. It's like, I need to go to work, so my kid needs to go to school.
Right. No, it's a big, big problem.
So, communication between parent and school is so super important. I have a son who's a handful, and certainly in school. He's a lot to handle in school. And, my wife, I'm going to tear up over here. My wife got a call from his teacher, the other day, Mora Sarah. I didn't think this was going to be that difficult. Mora Sarah. And she called up and she said, I just want you to know he's amazing. And she was like, well, really? Because, we love him also. We think he's awesome. But she's like, first of all, he's making me so much of a better person and teacher because the amount of things I'm learning from him, that I see from him, what I do to try to make him smile. She said, but finally today I had a breaking point with him where he was doing something and he was like hiding behind something. And I said to him, I'm like, wow, you could be a spy. You're so good at this. And he put on the biggest smile, like he loves stuff like that. She's like, he put on the biggest smile. He was so happy. And she was like, I just wanted you to know that we turned a corner in our relationship, me and him. And I really feel that things are going to start. And she sent me, you had to hear this guy, see that my wife is texting me during the conversation. I was at work. My wife is texting me during the conversation crying. She was like, I don't know who this lady is. This is amazing. She's amazing. Sure enough. Now he doesn't say positive things. The son of mine, he stays away from saying positive things. He doesn't want anyone to think that positive things are going on with him. By the way, I'm making him sound like he's 30. He's 5. So yeah. So he like if he's gonna draw something, he's always gonna draw something with a frown because he wants you to know there's a frown going on. Like, okay, it's perfect, it's great. So we draw together. We love doing it. I make frowns too. Then he makes a smiley face because we can't frown together. And sure enough, I come home and he's sitting there talking. And I don't know if anyone ever saw any of my classes on Torah Anytime or any of these other places, but a lot of times I'm doing them in my living room, in my dining room, and there's a jersey hanging behind me. So it's a jersey some of my students bought me a few years ago. It says Rabbi Yossi and number 1 on it. And my students in Israel bought it for me when I was moving to Cleveland. It's a Cleveland jersey, Cleveland basketball jersey. And my son, I was sitting at my dining room table. I was working or learning or something. And my son comes up to me and he goes, Papa, look what I made. And I look down, he's holding a hanger that he made in school that it was like a wire hanger that they put like these beads on and they make it all, fantastic looking. Mm-hmm. And he goes, look what I made. So I said, wow, it's so nice. And I saw there was like a portion missing. Like he didn't put as many on as like most kids would have put on. So he goes, Papa. I'm like, yeah. He goes, my Mora is so nice. I was like, what? He goes, my Mora is so nice. She knows that I don't like to put on all the beads. So she said, it's okay. And you had to see his little smile when he said it. He felt so accepted and loved. And he goes, Papa, you know what I wish you used the hanger for? I said, what? He's like, we should put the jersey on it. I'm like, yes, I'm going to put the jersey on it. And we put the jersey on and everything. He did so well. He did so well that night. Why? He had a constant acceptance in school, acceptance in home, acceptance.
His friends.
When a kid feels that way, there is nothing you can't do to get through to them. And just by the way, I've found this countless times. Kids with ADD, kids with ADHD, when they feel a connection with a teacher, it is a miracle how all of a sudden, and I'm not trying to be facetious or sarcastic here, how all of a sudden their imbalance starts to correct itself in that room. They're able to sit, they're able to connect, they're able to listen. It is wild how it works. But I've seen this happen countless times. I'm sure there are people that are going to be disagreeing with me, but I've seen it time and time again. When a teacher takes out time to try and connect with the kid, when they take out time to try and connect with the kid, I'll just say this one story. My sister-in-law is a teacher, and she's an incredible teacher in Israel, in El-Ad. And she had this student, Tomer, and the kid was acting out and this and that. She realized that like maybe he wasn't, he had an older brother who was a little bit of a superstar and this and that, and maybe he wasn't getting enough accolade at home. So she's like, you know what, I'm going to go out of my way. I'm going to call him. She works like crazy hours. So she's like, but I'm going to call this kid's parents tonight, and I'm going to tell them that he's doing amazing and that he's really doing well in class. And that she saw that he really was trying. And she said, not only that, I want to tell him. So she goes over to Tomer and she says, Tomer, I just want you to know, I saw how much you were trying today with everything you were doing. I'm calling your mom tonight. I'm telling her because I can't be the only one that's this proud of you. I got to tell someone. This kid's a teenager, by the way. And he was like, wow, really? He's like, you're going to call my mom? He's like, I'm calling your mom. I said, okay, wow, thank you. Yeah. Sure enough, next day, Tomer comes in and he's back to his old antics, jumping around. He's not doing the work. And she's like, I can't believe it. She's like, I thought that would work. I really thought I knew him. I really thought I connected with him. I spent all that time trying to help him through it. And this was supposed to be like the cherry on the top. And here he is the next day, like right back at it. And she was like trying to think. She could not piece it together. Sure enough, she's in a staff meeting later that day. And, all the teachers are asking, how's it going? What's doing? So one of the things the principal does is he goes around and he says, is there any specific problem in your class? So he gets this one woman and she said, there used to be. She's like, but out of nowhere today, the kid is doing amazing. Like he just turned over a new leaf clearly and he's doing amazing. So I have no one to bring up, because usually they go around, someone will bring up the name and everyone else can say, oh yeah, in my class he is, in my class he isn't. And then they could work out like, what are you doing differently than me? So everyone goes around, and so the principal finally gets to my sister-in-law, and he says to her, what about you? She's like, to be honest with you, I know I never bring anyone up, but there's this one kid, Tomer, and she goes to this whole thing. Everyone's like, yeah, Tomer's very difficult, and she's like, he did so well yesterday. I called his parents, and I don't know what happened. It just didn't, it didn't make any effect. And all of a sudden, this other teacher who said, I had a problem student, but now today he turned over a new leaf. She goes, oh my gosh. And everyone turns to her like, what? She's like, you called Tomer's parents. And she was like, yeah. She's like, why? What's the matter? We're calling Tomer's parents. She's like, nothing. She's like, you called, I'm going to make up a last name. She goes, you called Tomer Cohn's parents, right? And she was like, yeah. She's like, you called Tomer Cohn's parents in 11th grade. And she's like, yeah. Why? She's like, because there's a Tomer Cohn in 10th grade, and you might have called his parents. And she's like, why would I have called his parents? She's like, well, because he was acting really, really good today in my class, and he never acts good in my class. And I think you called the wrong parents. She ran out of the meeting, runs up to the kid, and she goes, did your parents get a call from me yesterday? And he's like, no, you lied to me. And she explained it to him. That's why he was acting out. That's why the whole thing. You have no idea the connection. Now, for this other kid that didn't even know anything, nothing, just calling the parents to tell them
how well he was doing made such an impact. Made such an impact that the kid just flipped over the next day. You have no idea what kind of impact you can make. But as far as the teachers go and the parents go, you guys got to be in contact with each other. Constant contact. Don't spend hours on the phone with the teacher. It's not right. But 10 minutes a week is fine. 10 minutes every other week, just to touch base. Ask if they need anything for their classroom. Ask if there's anything you can do to help out, to bring in. Ask. It's so important for there to be a relationship over there, because the kid then feels safe, he feels understood, he feels accepted, and you're able to do that throughout the kid's day. You end up with a very, very strong child. Whether he has disabilities, whether he doesn't have disabilities, you end up with a very strong, loved child.
I think that's a really beautiful point. And it's interesting, we didn't really talk about substance abuse at all in this entire talk.
Well, I think we did in reality, because to me, I agree with what you said initially. This is how I talk about drugs, by the way.
Right.
I talk about it by the preventative side of it.
Exactly.
Because, everyone sort of knows really nowadays what to do if a kid is using drugs. We got to get him to a counselor, and we got to take, and every kid's different, and things are going to happen. It's going to be one thing or the other, and so on and so forth. But people are just hyper focused on trying to find the drugs as opposed to prevent them.
Right.
And what I'm telling you to do is to actively prevent them as a child. The only way to do that is to have that open, loving relationship with your kid. Give them a hug as often as possible. Please put your phone away.
Right.
I have people texting me, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I have people texting me things like, I need to speak to someone right now, or it's over for me. I'm going to kill myself. I still put my phone away when I walk into the house. It might be irresponsible of me. It might be irresponsible of me. But that's my problem, not my kids.
Right.
They didn't sign on to help that person. I did.
Yeah, there's one of the saddest children's books I've ever seen. It was called "You're Missing It," and the whole story of the
father. Please don't talk about it. I can't. Don't start with me on "You're Missing Me." Woo, that was beautiful. I cried the whole way through that book.
You saw that book?
Yes, of course. I cried the whole way through that book.
I put it back on the shelf.
It's written by, I'm trying to remember the author. That's how I found it, was through the author. It was, I forgot the author's name, but yeah.
This child is on the playground, and the parent is on the phone the whole time. And
You're missing it. On
the phone, and all the things are happening.
Very strong book.
Very, very strong. So that's a whole other talk, and I've used so much of your time, and I really, really appreciate it. I'm just going to summarize just really quickly, because I mentioned that kids have to really do well in 3 domains at home, which is the only thing we can really work on as parents, right? Although we can advocate for our kids once we accept them, right, for who they are, for them to have the best possible, success in both the social and the academic domains. And I'm going to beg you as a pediatrician to get your kid evaluated. If your teacher says that there's problems, please don't be in denial of it. Get them that help, because, no matter how much you work at home, they need to feel success, outside school and socially too.
Right. 100%.
So I want to thank you so much, and I hope we can do this again so we can talk about, because I feel like we just scratched the surface, but thank you.
Yeah. This stuff could go on forever.
I promise you, we're ready for the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Be well.